his government has no plan for Trump's tariffs. So we're going to look at that early in the show today. The whole tariff thing is as big a deal as Carney's conflicts, and we're going to look at all of that. His disclosure came out, and there's lots of responses to that. The United Kingdom is not allowing farmers to water their crops due to hot weather, which seems like a bad plan if you want crops. So why would the United Kingdom do that? Why would they engage in that kind of warfare on their own citizens? It doesn't make a lot of sense. The Grok team speaks out about Grok and what they've done and what Grok did and so on and so forth. Trump loses it even more on Epstein, and his base is starting to respond on Truth Social. And that's interesting to me. I find it all interesting. What's going on? Is Trump trying to orchestrate this whole thing? It's, again, like the plot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. At one point, you're convinced that Spike is the bad guy, and then things move over, and then you're convinced that Angel's the bad guy, right? And you get swayed by the writers. Trump gets to be the writer of all of this, and now he's moved on. And will the audience go along with him? Again, just like wrestling, feels like we're being managed in the same way. Remember the look inside yourself statement? We're going to revisit that when looking at Carney's conflicts. South Africa, that was when he was asked by Rosemary Barton about his conflict of interest. And he says, look inside yourself, Rosemary. You're starting at a place of badness or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but we'll watch it together. It's pretty interesting. South Africans start beating up Spaniards in Spain. Did they get an Order 66? I don't know. Carney's conflicts are exposed, so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Mark Carney. Here's Senator Denise Batters, and she's responding to the National Post reporting on Carney to recuse himself from dealings with over 100 companies in sprawling government conflict screen. So this is a big screen. It's a big deal. And what's going to happen, right? And Denise Batters says, where did Carney pay his taxes for the last 5 years? Incredibly, Canadians still don't know that answer either. True, right? We've got a little bit of information, but not much. Moose is Loose is doing some great work looking at Mark Carney's disclosure, and he put it through AI, and his whole goal was to find out how many Canadian companies Mark Carney was invested in and where the other companies' location, where they were located for his investment portfolio. So he puts it all in, and there's 500 odd companies. And the breakdown, Mario says, Moose on the Loose just cracked Carney's blind vault, 583 total holdings. 3 of them are Canadian. Train Furnaces is one, and he uses the Train Furnaces as an example of liberals getting rich, and his concern for insider cronyism in the Carney era continuing just like it did in the Trudeau era. And 530 companies is 91% of Mark Carney's portfolio, and they're American. So that's interesting. 35% tariff guts Canadian jobs, while 91% of Carney's bag sits south of the border. That's not a conflict. That's a business model, right? He's doing this to make money, it seems. We'll listen to a minute of this. This is great work. And I mean, this guy's got a good YouTube following, so you've probably heard of him or whatever, but you should go check out his work, and we'll just watch a minute of this. Here we go.
The data, all of this stuff here, all of these assets that he has, he owns stocks in all of this stuff. Like, look at all these companies. So I spent hours sorting this data, running it through multiple different AI programs to organize it. And I wanted to know the origin of the country that these companies are headquartered. What country do they operate out of? Because this just tells a lot about Mark Carney. Are a lot of these in China? Are they in India? Are they in America? Are they in UK? Are they in Canada? You think most of his investments should be in Canada? I think most of them should be in Canada, considering he's Prime Minister of Canada. After processing this, and I should just note here, I've not verified all of these because there's a lot of work to verify them, which I will eventually, but I have cross-referenced all of these with multiple AI. They came up with the exact same list except one. There's a total of 568 of these assets, these companies that Mark Carney's invested in. Take a deep breath, because this is pretty shocking. This list here has Canada, France, Netherlands, and the UK companies all together. If we scroll here, you can see not that many. It's just this here, the United Kingdom. Zoom in here, you got Rolls-Royce. Once again, I haven't verified all these, so some of these may be wrong, but both AI systems had it pretty close down to one. And the Canadian investments, what is Mark Carney holding? Waste Connections, Canadian Pacific Kansas City Railway, Canadian Natural Resources. 3 companies. Mark Carney's invested in 3 Canadian companies, 2 in France, 4 in Netherlands, and about 24 in the United Kingdom. How many holdings does he have in America? This should explain everything about what's going on with the tariffs. Let me just zoom out for you. Let me zoom out a little bit more. How about some more? I can't even show you. Look at this. This is all the American companies the guy's invested in. It's so small, it doesn't even fit on the screen. I had to make 2 lists. It was so long. These are all American companies. You can zoom in here.
Right. So the Prime Minister of Canada is heavily invested in the United States and American companies. Isn't that interesting? How can he possibly make decisions for what's best for Canada in that position? It seems wrong, right? It seems incorrect. Ryan says this is the conflict of interest list that Carney has to recuse himself publicly from. No wonder this wasn't made public during the election. This is outrageous. Yeah, it's pretty outrageous. Pretty outrageous. So the list, I showed you this yesterday, and this is just responses, people who are finding out about this. Here's Mark Carney, originally asked about this by Rosemary Barton. And I think this is the one where he gets so testy that he asks for a cut and like, let's do that again. I think I yelled at her a little bit. Let's scrub that one, pretend that didn't happen and reset and go. Because I guess you can do that when you're the smartest banker in the room, right? Ryan says, flashback to February when Carney was asked if he would let Canadians know what they were dealing with when it came to his business dealings and financial picture. Note his reaction to the question, then watch him uncomfortably try and explain it away. After what was released yesterday, it's no wonder he left Canadians in the dark about it before the election. This man can't be trusted. Here we go.
You are not yet subject to ethics requirements.
I don't have any power, Rosie.
No, but would you put anything out there for Canadians to better understand your business dealings and your financial picture before you're elected?
Obviously, I'm going to comply with all the ethics guidelines, conflicts of interest guidelines, blind trust.
But during an election, before you have a seat, would you be willing to show Canadians what they're dealing with and what you've been dealing with?
Well, let's be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. I was UN Special Envoy for Climate Action. I was chair of chair of Brookfield on a number of philanthropic boards and did a lot of charity and other work. So that's all disclosed in the public domain. I will immediately subject myself, if I am elected Liberal leader, of course I'm going to immediately subject myself to all the ethics guidelines, conflicts of interest guidelines, other guidelines in order to pursue.
You are not yet
So not as forceful as the next clip I'll show you. Here's, oh, hold on. I think this is out of order. No, I just don't have it. Huh. Oh, well, there was another clip with the look inside yourself part. Oh, I hope I still have that. Darn. If it's gone, I apologize. Mark Nixon says, imagine a doctor owning stocks in 103 drug companies, prescribes only their meds, tells patients, relax, it's the best medication, trust the science. Mark Carney is the doctor. That patient is Canada. And so I think that's a pretty good analogy. I think that he is going to be influenced by these holdings of his. And in fact, he talks about here how through legislation, the government is forcing companies to use Mark Carney's Brookfield products. And, without that legislation, that doesn't happen. And so he's not above enriching his companies on the back of government legislation. Ryan says, in 2024, Carney admitted to being involved in government policies that benefited him and others as investors. A policy in the UK demanded airlines use 10% sustainable aviation fuel. So he then invested $1 billion into the company that provided it to them. So is that incorrect? It seems like, well, Moose on the Loose goes through, and I thought Mark Carney owned Train. Apologies about that. But Moose on the Loose goes through the train stock and the announcement of the heat pumps and then train stock going up and insiders getting rich on that. And that's cronyism, and that's what I want to avoid. And Mark Carney seems to be the recipient. It seems like Mark Carney's companies, Brookfield, people who provide heat pumps, maybe to Train, right? Maybe they're the source provider to Train. Those companies won. And did they have insider knowledge? Were they told? And Moose on the Loose speculates, suggesting giving money to families and having them invest the gift into these companies so that it has multiple times return, so on and so forth. And the return is really good. And so I think that Canadians are right to be concerned. Your past behavior indicates your future behavior. And so Mark Carney's past behavior, here it is. Here's the look inside yourself part. Your past behavior indicates your future behavior. So I think that Mark Carney is not going to agree with any of these assessments. I think that Mark Carney is going to be frustrated and want to not answer the questions that are uncomfortable. And he's just going to want to paper over this and say, like, this is how things are done. Trust me, I'm a very smart banker. And I just don't trust him that he's a very smart banker or that he has our best intentions at heart, because look at his portfolio. Here is Mark Carney going back and being asked about these conflicts of interest. And he said, what possible conflicts could there be?
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Trump spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Right. Look inside yourself. It's just such a weird thing to say. Pierre Poilievre is weighing in on this whole disclosure. He says Prime Minister Carney should sell all of his holdings and hand the cash to a trustee to have it invested in a blind trust so he doesn't know what he holds. Otherwise, he will always know how political decisions can affect his personal wealth. That's the crux of the problem. It doesn't matter that he's got somebody, a blind trust, managing it. If he largely owns the same things, then probably he's going to have an idea of how things are going, right? And have an idea of how to funnel things into that direction. And he believes in himself. He believes in this climate change stuff. He believes that heat pumps are better than a gas-powered furnace or whatever. He believes this stuff, and he believes it's the greater good or whatever. And so he would say, why not? Why not invest the money and make these things happen? And people would say, wow, right, of course. And so, right, smartest guy in the room or whatever. The real Mr. Bench, but it just provides cover. It's not genuine. It's not real. And these mitigation tactics that make some people rich who own heat pumps and heat pump companies, right? That's not excuse. Like, that's not just hand waving away. Like, oh, well, they got rich and some people got heat pumps that were less efficient. And so what, they meant well. I think that maybe they know what's really going on, and not that maybe they don't mean well. Maybe they don't. Why do we think that they mean well when we can see materially that things have gotten worse in the last 10 years? And I don't think that's Donald Trump's fault. I don't think that's Zelensky's fault, right? I think maybe Zelensky and maybe even Trump are in on the game, because the game is how much money can we take from the taxpayer and put it into our special projects or whatever. But I don't think that's anybody's fault except our leadership who have sold us out to the globalists, it seems like to me. Real Mr. Bench says Mark Carney created a whole department to deal with his conflict of interest. They must be very busy. He has 103 conflicts of interest so far. When asked about them in the House of Commons, Mark Carney refused to answer. And so this is another back and forth with Mark Carney evading the question badly. Let's move on a little bit. We've got to talk about trade. And I'm just shocked the difference a year makes, right? A year ago today, Donald Trump was shot in the ear, right? And so this is the year ago headline of the Sunday Denver Post: gunman dies in attack, right? Trump says he was shot in the ear. So pretty wild that was a year ago today. I wonder what today will bring, right? Mark Nixon says Trump slaps a 30% tariff on the EU, 30% tariff on Mexico, 35% tariff on Canada. Why is Canada paying the highest price? Could be the DST, the Digital Services Tax debacle. Carney's on vacation, so he doesn't seem to care. He's not going to deal with this until 10 days from now. Canada retaliation tariffs, all of the above. Yeah, well, I mean, take your pick, right? Donald Trump likes to counterpunch and likes to counterpunch big. So that's what he's doing, I guess, it seems, right? So we'll see. Melanie Jolie declares us in a golden age. Do you feel the golden age, everybody? Oh, yes. So many people can get apartments and houses, and look at all the babies. There's a whole baby boom, right? Like the super big golden age, according to Mel Jolie, with Europe. Europe? What? Her?
EU. I think we're in really, the golden age that is starting between the EU and Canada. Thank you.
Ceci m'a fait la...
No. Why? Why do you think that? They think that because that gives us a market to sell our EVs to, because if the US market doesn't exist, then we'll pivot to the EU market and we can ship our cars there. And it'll be exactly the same. And there'll be no difference whatsoever. And nobody will notice anything. Keep believing the lies, right? Keep believing our system. Here is Mel Jolie talking about the trade debacle and were we misled? And here's the back and forth. We won't listen to all of it, but we'll listen to at least a minute and a half. Here we go.
Good afternoon, Minister. Your government ran on the promise of being elbows up and standing up for Canadians, but respectfully, that hasn't been happening. So do you think Canadians have been misled by the promises of your government?
I reject that premise. What I'm saying is, of course, we will make sure that we defend our workers. That has been at the core of everything we've been doing. But at the same time, we're dealing with a very unpredictable U.S. administration. We're not the only ones. That's the case for the EU, and I won't talk, of course, for my colleague Séjourné, but that's the case also for every single country on this planet. So my point is right now is that we need to make sure that we're in action mode, we're in solution mode with other countries, because we're not alone. And so that's why 15 days after the agreement that was signed between Prime Minister Carney and President von der Leyen, we're meeting here in Ottawa. And within the next week, so the end of the summer, I'll be going to Europe, because we need to make sure that our businesses, our industries in Canada, are able to have access to European markets, and same for European companies having access to Canada. And that's our goal.
Some people were saying, I think it was Mr. Sunshine Baby was saying, maybe it was Clyde Do Something. I saw just a quick write-up. They were talking about how Canada's movement with the EU and pivot to the EU for arms and a whole bunch of other things that we traditionally get from the United States was badly timed and improperly done, badly negotiated, because first you should sign the deal with Donald Trump and then pivot to the EU after the deal is signed and squared away. Now, Canada doesn't have much leverage, and we've already started announcing deals and this pivot away. Somebody sent me a video yesterday, and it's in the show later on, talking about how this is really a war between Trump and the old world power, really. And I think there's maybe something to that. They're going to try and isolate Trump. They're going to try and say Trump's behaving erratically. Trump's making the United States behave erratically. They're trying to build this case. They're also saying that they're going to appoint a special prosecutor and hang Epstein around Trump's neck too, and say he was collaborating with this terrible monster Epstein, and try and take him down that way, because the MAGA base is splintering on this thing. We'll talk about it later in the show. But I find that interesting, and I think that there may be something to it, in that I see Canada cozying up to Europe and kind of ignoring the United States from a trade point of view. The United States doesn't care, because the United States knows that economically Canada depends on the United States. So the United States says, I don't give a shit if Canada doesn't pay attention to us. Like, what do we care? But Canada and the EU and the UK and other NATO countries are going to try and make the case that Donald Trump is making the United States behave erratically. And because of this, we have to isolate them through trade, maybe sanctions, and worse, maybe more than sanctions. Maybe it's the Russia-US alliance and we have to take them down, or something to that effect. I don't know how exactly they're going to sell it, but it feels like we're being sold, while Trump falters on his attempt to change the audience's view of who the bad guy is. The EU people are themselves trying to change the view of the world, of the Americans, not as the good guy world police, but as the bad guys who need cowing and bringing back into into line under the rules-based order or whatever you want to call it. And so that's what I think that this is. That fundamentally, I think that this is the beginnings of those movements. And it's not, I don't think it's good. It's just what's happening. Brian Lilly says the Carney government, the one that said that they had a plan, the plan's to pivot to Europe. The plan's to isolate the United States and pivot to Europe. That's the plan that's being executed. It's just going to be very economically painful for us. So that's sucks. He said the one that had a plan beats no plan. The one that said that they would be elbows up clearly doesn't have a clue what they're doing. Maybe they should either admit that or change strategies. Maybe. Yep, absolutely. Tom Quiggin says, has anyone seen Canada's fentanyl czar lately? Kevin Brosseau seems to have been missing in action for quite a while. Haven't seen any news at all from the fentanyl czar, period. Zip. Nothing. So isn't that weird? Isn't that a strange thing? How much does that guy get paid every month? Nothing from him at all. And so Donald Trump is asking for, instead of bullshit lip service, to actually help with the fentanyl thing. And if you don't, then we're just going to leave these tariffs on and you're going to be economically destroyed. And, oh well, we'll get the 51st state for pennies on the dollar. Like Donald Trump seems to have, in a chess game, you can have a move called a pin. And the pin can challenge two pieces at the same time. Like say you have a knight and you're challenging a queen and a bishop, right? And so your knight will either in the next move take a queen or take a bishop. Now it's up to you which one you choose because you're in the pin, right? And so if you value your queen over your bishop, then you move your queen and you surrender your bishop. That's where Canada is. We're pinned. We're kind of fucked, right? And so if we don't do what Trump says, he's going to unleash more economic turmoil, and he wins either way. He wins either way. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Europe comes in here and can replace the United States economically for Canada. But that seems really unlikely to me. That's the plan, but that seems very unlikely. So take that for what it's worth. Here is the National Post. This is our grab bag of governance for today. And the National Post is reporting a 33-year-old puffin on New Brunswick Island going strong with a chick. So I don't know how old puffins age to, but isn't that a strange age? And how many people are counting the age of puffins in New Brunswick? How much money are we spending counting the age of puffins? I'm highlighting this story because certain numbers keep popping up in unlikely areas, and it just keeps happening over and over and over and over again. And if you have eyes to see it, you can't unsee it, and you keep noticing it over and over again. And I just wanted to show you. I keep noticing this thing. Keeps popping up. It's super weird. Mrs. Roboto says the left is one of the most hypocritical groups I've ever seen. They cry about how over 150 years ago, white men stole the native people's land and call us colonizers while cheering on immigrants taking over our country right now. Weird, right? They say eating animals is wrong while killing their own babies. They call us grandma killers for not taking an experimental vaccine while advocating for MAID for senior citizens, and worse, what they did to senior citizens in old folks' homes during COVID. They say my body, my choice when it comes to abortions, but want to force vaccines and mask mandates on everyone. Right? Isn't that such a hypocritical? Forcing these two positions to be held in your mind at the same time causes dissonance because you're conflicted, because these two things are in conflict, right? And so it even puts you more out of sorts, because how can I believe this but not that, right? And so very, very, very odd. But people do this to themselves, and then they can't figure out why they can't sleep. They claim to stand for gay children while mutilating their bodies and changing who they are. They claim to be pro-women and feminist while allowing men to invade their personal spaces, beating and dominating them in their own sports. They claim to be loving and tolerant while threatening violence on anyone who doesn't agree with their narrative. They claim to be peaceful while burning down buildings and cop cars. They claim to be pro-Canada by saying buy Canadian, but never talk about hire Canadian. They claim to be for democracy and freedom while taking away all of your rights. They are sheep who do whatever they're told without thinking for themselves, even when it doesn't make sense. It's part of the psyop. They're being fed these things. They're being told that good people do these things. And it doesn't matter if it's not good for you. That's what's good for society, citizen. If it's not good for you and that's uncomfortable for you, well, that's part of the whole thing. And you should, embrace that discomfort. That's what they're selling. That's what they're selling. And so this is all part of the psyop. They're trying to prep people for this and onboard people. It's like a cult. And I wish it weren't so, but it really, really is so. Here's Garnet Genius, and he's talking about doing more studies. He says, we all love summer, but it's summer without summer jobs for too many young people. Too bad liberals blocked a summer study of student employment and put their summer break ahead of the needs of young people. A summer study of student unemployment? Why do we need a study? Here's Wiretap Media. He's done the study already. He said summer jobs don't exist because of mass immigration. Study over. So, like, what are we going to do about it? And so this is the half measures we get. Oh no, the liberals didn't want to do a study, so we don't get a study. Enjoy your summer. That's it, right? Become a YouTuber, kids. Sorry, there's no part-time jobs, I guess. Danielle Smith, the other day, she was with an Israeli person. Today, she's balancing this all out. And she says, what an incredible morning with the Ismaili Muslim community at their 28th annual Stampede breakfast. From the delicious Basri to the unmatched hospitality, this event captures the spirit of the Stampede, welcoming, generous, and full of heart. Thank you for having me. So I just find the pandering interesting, and it's cross-party. Everybody's doing it. Why? Very interesting. Shazzy says, detached homes in Milton are now averaging 1.26 million, down nearly 9% year over year. Families who bought in 2022 are sitting on losses the size of annual salaries, $50,000, $60,000. The dream of safe long-term growth has turned into a slow-motion financial bleed. The bleeding is not over. And so this price correction comes with consequences. The other day, there was a guy talking about how turning off the mass immigration is a cure-all and it fixes everything. And I'm telling you, we are in the throes of a Ponzi scheme. And if you turn off all of that economic activity, then it's going to it is going to crash the economy. It's a poison pill for the economy. And then the socialists can walk in and take over because they'll have to socialize everything to make bread affordable again because of all the messed up economics that have happened here. And without the injection of all that money that the Ponzi scheme is injecting, then our economy is going to have a bad way. The only way to fix it is to slowly wean yourselves off of it. The cold turkey is very, very hard. Weaning yourself off of it is easier, but takes longer, and people need to buy in, I guess. But I mean, not really. You could do it as a government if you had sense. You don't have to do the austerity thing in a negative way. That's what Doug Ford was trying to do after coming in from Kathleen Wynne. He said he was going to, quote, grow the economy. Okay. And so that means I know that we're going to bring in 1 million people or whatever, and all I have to do is stop funding the government waste that grows along until the tax base catches up. And we're importing 1 million people a year, so the tax base is going to catch up soon. And then when the tax base catches up, then I can start increasing the price of government again because all these people are here, and then it looks like a balanced financial system. We're in a Ponzi scheme, and we have this growing poison pill. The longer we continue to inflate all of the Ponzi scheme, right? It's going to be painful when it pops, but it's going to pop. But the whole economy, it actually just might be the whole economy. That might be the whole thing, right? So that's pretty wild. So people in Canada like having their houses worth a lot of money because they look at it as a retirement thing. That's been true for 40 years. People grew up with that idea. Parents grew up with that idea. It's worked out well for them. They've made lots of money, and they're teaching their kids to do that. If this whole system is turned on its head, and it looks like it's going to be turned on its head one way or the other, it's going to be painful for people who aren't prepared, right? So I don't know. Preparing for all of these things is maddening. Like it's also impossible. So at this point in time, be prepared for today. Table Salt says 10,000. Just wait until the federal layoffs start. So the union's upset about the 10,000 person job loss because of the ending of the immigration policies that allowed all the foreign students. So this is the first in the dominoes. More are coming. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we have intelligent financial management. But I mean, the last 5 years have shown me that we don't. So unfortunately, we don't. Unacceptable Canadian Girl says sunscreen was made to stop skin cancer, so why have rates skyrocketed since its invention? In 1935, melanoma affected 1 in 100,000 people. Today, in some countries, it's 30 or 40 times higher than that. What happened? Right. What happened? That's pretty wild stuff. Jinghai Li or Jingli Hai, no, I'm getting his name really. This guy says Pierre Poilievre explains the reason why he lost Carleton, and I thought this was a really good response from him. No ifs, ands, or buts, but it's just the plain truth. So here's Pierre Poilievre reflecting on why he lost his riding. There's no mention of the jury-rigged seating. There's no, or the jury-rigged riding. There's no mention of the injection of a lot of people, like pulling in different ridings into that riding to turn it more liberal. No mention of the longest ballot initiative, no mention of anything like that. And he's trying to take responsibility and be the bigger man. But I think it's very clear that we have problems with our election system, and ignoring that entirely is a red flag for me too. Here's Pierre Poilievre.
Then how do you make sense of the 4,513 votes that you lost by in your riding?
Well, the reality is it's a riding that is over. It was very simple. I was very clear that we would be cutting the federal bureaucracy if I was prime minister. And it was an Ottawa riding with a lot of federal public servants who disagreed with that approach. And they ran a very aggressive campaign, particularly the public sector unions did, to defeat me on that basis. Now, some people might say, well, it wasn't the best idea to run on a smaller federal public service when you're an Ottawa MP, but I had an entire country to represent, and I had to be honest with people. Like, I guess I could have done what the Liberals did, which is hide their plans, but I didn't do that. I said very clearly, we're going to have to eliminate federal public service jobs. That's the only way you bring down taxes and deficits. And I was honest about that, and the people in that particular constituency voted accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Poilievre, you have been generous with your time.
So that's that. Yeah, sure, but kind of leaves things out. Here's another bit of kind of pivoting to Alberta. Pascal says the state of our country right now. Juno News are reporting police warned stampede goers of sexual assault in Arabic and Hindi. That's interesting, right? You don't look around for 10 years all of a sudden. Police issued, if we have to adapt public safety messaging in this way, maybe it's time to ask tougher questions about mass deportations, right? So people aren't coming here and learning English, and that's a problem. That's concerning. So very, very concerning indeed. And this won't end well. This usually ends up in conflict. I hope that we're able to find a way out of that. And mass deportations are a form of conflict. Enforcing the law is a form of conflict as well, right? But we'll see if it just stays there or if it escalates. And we have to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody on the stream, and we'll catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we will carry on. We're going to do a bit of Alberta news. Jeffrey Rath is responding to this. Mr. Sunshine Baby is highlighting that Pierre Poilievre fully supports United Canada. He does not support any kind of separatism, and that's interesting. Oh, I got to shut off the stream. Here we go. And so here's Poilievre on this. Here we go.
It's a great